Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Hilliard, and welcome to our EA Meetings 2023 Year Ahead panels. Today, we will have the third and final day of panel discussions featuring some of your favorite astrologers with lots of talk about the astrology of the coming year. We'll try to monitor the chat for any pertinent questions that come up as we go along. We're scheduled for up to 3 hours today, but it may not go that long, and we'll take a short break in the middle. We all hope you enjoy what we have to say. Robin Grabfelder is now going to introduce today's panelists to you.
Hi, we are going to have Kim Marie moderate today's panel. Kim Marie has practiced evolutionary astrology for almost 40 years. She's the director of the Evolutionary Astrology Network, where she teaches and produces conferences, and workshops, and she's also a deep memory process practitioner. We have Michael Pinchera, and he has practiced astrology for 45 years, and he is a graduate of the School of Evolutionary Astrology. Martha Hines is an author, healer, and astrologer, and she has 20 years of experience as a psychotherapist and a body worker. Daniel Fiverson is an evolutionary astrologer, author, lecturer, and teacher, and he has also studied the I Ching and Tarot. Bradley Naragon has been an astrologer for 13 years, and his main focus is evolutionary astrology. He is also an artist and has been creating beautiful astrology mandalas since 1998. Then we will have Eric Pride, and he is a predictive astrologer with 18 years of experience. Kim Marie, would you like to lead the panel?
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our winter solstice. I am coming to you from the northern plains of the United States, and I want you to know it's about 0 outside. It is snowing and the wind is blowing, and so I am even my screen, though my screen doesn't show it, I'm kind of the background outdoors as I look outside for what I see of that shortest day of the year and the welcoming back of the sun for those of us who live up here in the Northern Hemisphere. I am going to share my screen for you. I'm going to give us 3 base notes for us to remember as we discuss today's topics. We're going to look at Jupiter transiting through Aries and Taurus. We're going to look a little bit at the Mars retrograde and turning stationary direct. We're also going to look at the Venus retrograde in Leo that's coming up. We have some of our panelists who would like to speak to Eris today, and we may have other subjects that will just spontaneously come up for you. So thank you everyone for being with us. And if you are watching live, as Sue and Robin said earlier, you are most welcome to bring up any questions you have for us or bring up any subject matters that you would like us to address for you. One more thing, I just want to say thank you to Sue and Robin for all the work that you do behind the scenes for all of us to make these events happen, not only today with our 23 forecast, but everything that you do all year long with EA Zoom carrying on Linda's work. You are much, much appreciated. So let me share my screen with you for a moment here. And here we go. I think I got this. Oops, that was my one for Michael. Hold on just a second here. There we go. All right. So the first base note that I just want to point out for us through the year of 23 is the Mercury retrograde cycles. Mercury goes retrograde by reversing through the elements. If you're an astrologer, you can go fire, earth, air, water really, really fast. Can you go water, air, earth, fire backwards? That's some of our little languaging. Well, you can see here on the screen that with the Mercury retrogrades, you see the dates, you see the degrees here. We have Mercury in the Earth signs 7 out of the 12 months in 2023. When Mercury goes into Earth, it's going to slow down the communications. It's going to make us much more interested in the physical world, be it our resources, be it the things that are taking place with our climate and how it is changing, be it what makes us feel secure on a mental, mercurial level. So pay attention to this a little bit if you want to, because when it's in the fire and air element, which it will be for about 3 months, that's when everything's going to just speed up and race along, and communications might seem to go a little smoother. But for a lot of this year, Mercury is really going to ask us to take the time to think about what we want to speak. Again, to go into the physicality of language and think about it and be as clear as we can with our words. You may find people being, again, very practical with their words, or almost a bluntness, or a 3-word sentences, rather than being very laborious about things they are saying. So this will really have its coloring and its interactions in 2023, even though, we all know Mercury goes around that zodiac in what appears to be a pretty very fast fashion. The other base note, let's see if my slides will move. The other base note was talked about in more detail on Monday, but for astrologers on probably all 3 panels, it's very hard not to speak about the fact that slow-moving Pluto, 248 years around the zodiac, finishing up 15 years in Capricorn, is going to spend a lot of this year in that anaretic or last degree of Capricorn, but it's also going to go into Aquarius. And so Pluto in Aquarius is going to be one of those other major base notes, even though it only dips in there for 2.5 months, as you can see on your screen. It's still going to shake up the energy, and it's still going to perhaps surprise us once in a while. Maybe even have some of that shock and awe of Aquarius that comes along. It's also going to perhaps give us a few little insights of what may be coming, not just through this year, but for the next 20 years, because Pluto, as you can see on your screen here, is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. And 2023 is the initiation of Pluto into Aquarius. And I, for one, am excited about it. Any planetary archetype can be distorted or naturally expressed. But after a few thousand years of patriarchal distortions on the planet, and Pluto and Capricorn being the epitome of some of that, I'm looking forward to Pluto and Aquarius shaking things up. And when we shake things up, it gives us opportunities to change. The fixed air of Aquarius might want us to retreat for security reasons, but I invite all of you to pay attention to your own future-oriented messages that are coming through for you, and how can you make a change and difference in your own life? How can you shake your life up and move it ahead as you desire to do so? Finally, the last little base note, and for your information, I use the Michael Mukasey chart for the USA on July 4th. It's the 9:37 a.m. chart. And I just want to mention that we are just a week away from the USA having its 3rd Pluto return. Astrologers have been speaking about the year 2022. Well, we've been speaking about it for maybe a decade or two, that the USA is having a soul identity crisis right now, because for the first time in our country's history, Pluto has made it back to the spot it was at on July 4th, 1776. So having these Pluto returns, they don't just disappear in 2023. We will continue throughout the rest of this decade with transiting Pluto new phase to the USA Pluto. And so these rebirths that are coming along for our country, thank you, international listeners, I'm from the US, they're just the seed thoughts that we are beginning to lay. And I was thinking about this, the Bill of Rights, which was the first 10 amendments that were added to the Constitution, the US Supreme Court actually coming into being and starting to hear some of its first cases. All of those things happened with Pluto and Aquarius. There was a lot of change that continued to take place 240 some years ago in this country. And so let's remember that this third USA Pluto return is going to be with us here, not just for these few months or year into 2023, but again, we're going to feel this energy changing us as citizens, as a collective group of people, and how we choose to interact with the rest of the world for many, many years and decades to come. So I just, again, wanted to put in a couple of base notes before we move into our subject matter. And so I'm going to say, let's just start with the Mars retrograde and getting ready to turn stationary direct, because this is the cycle that is coming to a close here at early January. As you can see on your screen in the top in the red, Mars is going to go stationary direct on January 12th of next year at 8 degrees Gemini. And so Michael, I do have a chart for Mars stationary direct. I make very simple charts. I don't have one with as much detail as yours, but I am very happy to put that up for you, and also to bring up charts for anybody else who would like to discuss this. First of all, because I have these, here's the dates that Mars is in Gemini. Mars goes retrograde. It's in a sign for 7-8 months. And that is a very, very long cycle for Mars. And because it was retrograde in Gemini, many of us feel like it's been a Mercury retrograde cycle all the way through it. Little tidbit. Mars retrograde in Gemini opposing my Saturn, teeth, and Venus white blood cells. I had a tooth extraction, Mars surgery, in the last week. Here are the this is the highlights of Mars retrograde direct and its opposition for anybody who doesn't know this information yet. And then I also put this one in here too. Here's the aspects that Mars made. The major aspects, the trines, the sextiles make it into the astrological calendars, but we don't always see that it made waxing semi-sextiles to Uranus, that it made semi-sextiles and in conjuncts to the South Node as well. And so, Michael, here is just the Mars stationary direct chart. I had it in my files. I put it 0 degrees for Washington. That's what I have a tendency to do with a lot of mundane charts, so that we can see more of the generics rather than specific to a certain geographical location. So I hope this is enough visual for you and whatever you wanted to say. Take it away, Michael.
Okay, well, thank you, Kim Marie. Well, interestingly, I feel that talking about the Mars direct really should follow the Venus retrograde, because
okay.
Mars is really acts out. It really puts into effect all that we have internalized, in values and worth and all that. And so maybe we can come back to it if you don't mind. But
sure.
If I say anything about it right now, is that Well, what's really interesting while Mars is going direct is that the North Node and Mars will come together shortly after Mars goes direct. And what has been internalized as far as our values and what we're ready to put into action will really become stronger intentions. You know, and this plays out, of course, you know, in our personal lives and in social lives, and in the social realm in particular. You know, it works both ways. You know, there's so much that there is moving ahead, okay, in our intentions, what's been worked out towards positive evolutionary intent. And of course, this is operating for people who are have been resisting or in some illusionary mode, and they themselves, their particular motivations will drive them with an intensity too. So for all of the positivity of this and the drive, it's really what I foresee in the social realm, particularly in the US, but I think it's in a lot of places that it will, the divisiveness in people's will still be playing out and may even come to us a particular head after, especially after the North Node meets up with Mars.
Mhm.
But I'll say more when we start talking about Venus.
Sure. Well, if you don't mind then, let's open it up. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments on this whole Mars retrograde cycle? You know, end of 22, early 23, and as it goes stationary direct. Any of our other panelists?
I do. This is Martha. So one of the major components of this whole Mars journey that's been really highlighted for me is its repeated square to Neptune. And so it's going to make a final square to Neptune in May of 2023. And yesterday, as we're recording this, you know, Jupiter went from Pisces into Aries, which to me also has a similar quality of this energetic that reminds us that our action needs to start in Pisces, in the divine, in Neptune, right? We think of Mars and Aries as the start, the beginning, but really the beginning is, of course, Pisces. And so I feel like one thing I keep coming back to when I feel into the Mars, what's happening with Mars these days, is that it keeps getting rooted in its relationship to Neptune. And I feel this call for us to keep coming back into the ultimate beginning, true beginning, which is whatever word you want to use, but God, the all that is, etc.
Thank you. You know, as I put that list of, let's see if I'm doing this right. I think I have to do this. Yeah. All of these are waxing aspects to these outer planets right here that Mars made the aspects to. So yeah, Mars wants to move forward, but I really like your comment on the fact that everything starts from source, spirit, Pisces, Neptune first. Other panelists, comments?
I had a question. Michael, you had said something about Mars joining the North Node, and I'm trying to understand what you're referring to. Could you speak to that?
As Mars, what was I talking about? I have to go back to my ephemeris.
Mars would have went over the North Node before it went into Gemini in, what was it, August, I think it was.
Yeah, it's in.
So it would have been last summer.
Right. Let's see. Well, I'm looking at Aries. I guess I'm going ahead a little bit far into the next year.
It will square the nodes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant by median. It was the square, and this is where I really see this conflict of interest will be in play. I'm sorry, I was getting mixed up with Venus trining the lunar nodes. Okay, but at this time, by the middle of August of 2023. Mars will be in Virgo and the quincunx to the North Node. And this will bring more clarification as well as the desire to fulfill the values and ideals that have been set up before. And this will activate everyone and an adjustment needs to happen. And so when there is separation and conflict of interest, whether inside of one or in society, whatever, there's an intensity of emotions that will arise. And this, calls us to reevaluate our motives. And so as things move forward positively, all that we are holding on to, old patterns or to illusionary values and aims, there will be reactive and possibly violent, perhaps in some cases. And that which is upholding the truth and life-giving pursuits will also be actively focused upon with their intentions. And at the same time, Neptune is in the picture, and the dissolution of old forms that wants to be, calling for us to replace them with more universal and inclusive values, which is like the overshadowing of everything that's going on. And the negative side is how we human beings, manifest this through nebulous and irrational group mindsets, and which becomes an escape into a formlessness, all the while believing they have the truth. And only meaningless divisiveness can come out of this, right? And the quincunx to Pluto, which is also another overriding thing to this, is that this will amplify the breakdown and yet at the same time move towards transformation, rebirth. That's what I have to say about that.
Brad, Daniel, any comments?
Is
Thoughts?
the square to, so we're referring to Mercury is going to be squaring when the nodes are Aries, Libra, Mars will come into a square to the nodes as ruler of the North Node. Do we have a chart for that?
Yes. I don't think I have a chart for that one. I could easily make one up if somebody wants to give me a date. I left my solar fire open. If somebody wants to look that up, I will comment that one of the things that I had done is I had put together this little hit list. And I just wanted to point out that, Mars goes direct January 12th, 8 Gemini, Mercury stationary direct on the 18th, 8 Cap. And then on the 22nd, Uranus goes stationary direct at 15 Taurus. And so we have a 1, 2, 3 punch here coming up in January of these stationary direct planets that puts all the planets moving forward for 3 months. This is not something that's always really common in astrology. Many times we can have a few days or a few weeks of all the planets direct, and then somebody is going retrograde somewhere. So we've had a few years here where we get months, and it just happens to be the beginning of the calendar year where all the planets are direct. And in many respects, I think it just gives a lot of momentum to moving forward individually and collectively. So that one popped into me as I look at this Mars stationary direct that's going on. And so anybody have a Mars, when Mars is square, that I can quick draw up a chart?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat. It's May 27th, but it's not actually, that's before the node switch. But anyway,
Okay, all right. I'm not a good person at getting something out of the chat pane. I will have to just do, whoops, excuse me. I will have to just do a chart. And so, and what date did you use, Martha?
May 27th.
Mhm.
Again, I try to do everything to DC, and unless anybody wants me to use a different time period, I usually do this, okay, because it just allows the 0 degree to make it generic for all of us. So
And
let's
Jupiter will also be on almost exactly on the north node, so squaring Mars too. That time.
Okay, oops, guess what I did? Yeah, anybody ever do this one? 1923? Catch me on that one? Whoops, okay, I'm trying to go too fast for us all, everybody. So I'm just gonna take a breath here and slow down. And there we go. There we go. All right. We are close. So is it going, I did not catch Mars square the nodes, but I've got some notes here I'll quick look at. So are we seeing Mars square the nodes? Yeah, I've got on the 26th in my notes, so we're close. So that square is going to happen in the fixed signs rather than the cardinals. Bradley, you had a comment?
Well, I have a couple comments on this. I mean, this moment and the end of May is really fascinating to me, and especially in the sense of the Mars-Pluto cycle. I mean, because the Mars retrograde kind of gave us that really long inconjunct gibbous phase with the Mars-Pluto cycle. And so I think that when we finally reach the full phase opposition of the Mars Pluto and then it's square the nodes, I mean, to me, this is one of the most fascinating moments of the year, personally, because of how potent it is with the fixed axes and Pluto just going into Aquarius. And then obviously Jupiter has just gone into Taurus also and on the North Node. So there's just so much to say about this. I'm a little bit at a loss. I have a few things that I was going to say, but I'm going to wait a minute and see who else wants to speak to this.
Sure. And keep in mind that, Mercury will finish up a retrograde cycle in Taurus on May 14th. So we also have Mercury just stationary direct, making it third passage through Taurus and whatever aspects it's making. So I look at the chart and the first thing that comes to me is Earth events. Anybody else? Earth events are that other theme that I had said earlier, all of the resource security with Jupiter now, moving in to Taurus and its conjunction to the North Node. And again, Mars Pluto opposition square the nodes. Yeah. Resources, Earth events. Anybody else have other subjects?
I do, but Daniel's raising his hand. I'll go after him.
Oh, Daniel, go for it. I'm not
Yeah.
seeing you on, go ahead, babe.
I figured that because I realized I was invisible. It's okay. First, I want to just like second your emotion about what you said about Mars and Gemini retrograde feeling like Mercury, because one of when I talk to my clients, everybody knows about Mercury retrograde, but nobody knows about Mars retrograde, and everybody keeps asking me, is Mercury still retrograde? Is Mercury still retrograde? And it clearly was this Mars and Gemini transit that was really setting everybody back in terms of what was going on in their lives. Mars opposite Pluto disturbs me a little bit. I have trouble, especially in the fixed signs, seeing this as anything less than a challenging transit. And I don't want to come across as negative or but as I look ahead, I believe that in the long run, we're working towards, a huge evolutionary shift, but I think we're still like the chick, cracking its way out of the egg. There's a lot of work that has to be done, in the world around us. And clearly circumstances are, pushing us in that direction. But it's, I find it hard, having really, I don't want to say positive or negative, because I don't think there is such a thing. It's what is, finding, we have to learn to work with some of these challenges. We have been challenged for the past 2 years. And I think when I, start to talk about Jupiter and Eris later on, I'm finding that we're still in an uphill, we're still moving uphill. Everybody wants everything to, be over and everything's going to get better, but I just don't see that kind of miracle, transpiring. So that's just my 2 cents. Don't shoot me. I'm just the messenger.
Oh, I have a tendency to agree. You can't come through thousands of years of patriarchal distortions and have it magically change overnight.
Right.
Jeffrey Green would always say, we have uniform evolution and we have cataclysmic evolution. And sometimes it takes a cataclysmic evolution to bring about change.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
All the Aquarius energy, Aquarius is a beautiful sign. It's very progressive. But Jeffrey says that at any given time, when we're talking about Uranus, 1/3 of the population wants things to move forward progressively. 1/3 wants them to change by going back to the way they used to be, and 1/3 is just on the fence in the middle. And we're seeing that, and Neptune's U.S. is having its Neptune opposition. There are so many things going on behind the scenes that are really setting the stage here. That we can look at these personal planets, but when I sit and I do work like this, I come at it from more of a mundane level, because everybody's Mars and Venus and Mercury are really very individual to them. And it's very hard to kind of generalize and say, well, this is what's going to happen. It's not like we have a client sitting in front of us and we have some context of their chart and we can understand how this is going to play out. So I kind of look at it more from a mundane level. And that's the way I've kind of approached this, trying to understand cycles of history, perhaps, and what's come before, more or less, like you have. What you brought up with Pluto and Aquarius in the early years of this country, I think, is very important. But we also had the War of 1812, and we had a lot of stuff going on that was not all that pleasant as well. So that's but I'm getting ahead of my story.
Thank you, Daniel. Panelists, I don't see everybody, so instead of raising your hand, just feel free to speak up. All right. Bradley, back to you. Comments?
Well, I know Martha and Michael have their hands up, so I'll let them go, and I'll follow after them. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Martha.
Yeah, so my training is evolutionary astrology, particularly with Ari Moshe-Wolf and Heather Ensworth. So I'm steeped in that. And when I look at transits, what I also do is I have more of an intuitive, tapped into the spiritual world kind of approach to it. And so for me, when I see this transit, what I'm drawn to is this brings in the Jupiter going through Taurus and then doing its retrograde at 15 degrees of Taurus and that whole thing, and going over the North Node and all of that. So the Jupiter moving through Taurus and the Mercury retrogrades in Earth signs, to me, is really an opportunity to, on one level, to come back to our reality that we are Earth. And when we're moving through this transformation that we're all talking about, one of the things that feels so key on a neurobiological level is that we come back to the reality that our bodies are Earth beings. And there's this need for us to, like, like Pluto, I think of as an energetic of the caterpillar turning into the goop in the cocoon and then becoming the butterfly, right? That whole transformational process, metamorphic process. And so I feel into, okay, what is it that we need as we're making that massive soul level shift? And what I get told in my prayers and what feels really true in my own body is that we've been out of sync with the reality of our bodies. Like on a neurobiological level, we've been moving so quickly. It's almost like we dissociate, we come out of the energetic of our Earth being. So for me to see Jupiter on the North Node in Taurus squaring Mars and Pluto, I totally hear what you're saying about the potential for catastrophe and all of that. And I also feel I can feel how Mars is potentially a catalyst sitting opposite Pluto, which is trying to help us go into that cocoon time with the North Node and Taurus saying, hey, yeah, and come back to this reality that you are Earth, re-become yourself as Earth. And that's going to be we can't do this with our brains. It's not going to work. It's literally not true. We're not just brains, right? So we need to how are we going to move through the metamorphosis? The answers aren't going to be logical. They're going to be in our bodies and in our spirits. And again, part of that is re-becoming Earth.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the whole genetics of us as human beings, we are of the Earth, literally. So thank you. Those are very beautiful comments. Who was next?
I was.
Go
Michael.
ahead, Michael.
Yeah. Well, with Jupiter going into Aries, at the same time, Mars is in Gemini. Okay. And Mars, you can say, is a depositor of Jupiter. So this gives it a real self-initiating impulse, and to apply our energy towards desires and the fulfilling of our Venusian values in aesthetics. But it's raised up to this mental plane and giving energy to what and how we expand out into the world through communication, travel, making connections, and networking. But this also, Mars and Gemini can also disperse our attention, and disperse our will and activities into too many directions, weakening ourselves in whatever we intend, no matter how positive our intentions may be. So the questions that arise with Jupiter and Aries and Mars and Gemini put before us challenges to our enthusiasm for doing things just because we can. Most of these challenges are born from the results of previous actions, social practices, and policies. And to the degree we decide and desire and intend based on unconscious likes and dislikes, unthinking identification with blood, nation, and religion, the likelihood for an expansion of deploying technology towards the undermining, if not destruction of others. And this technology, is kind of based in a certain way in how we use our words, our thoughts, our words, and how we attain our aims. And we either use it to build each other up, to expand our possibilities in our personal relationships, in our communities towards a cosmopolitan, all-inclusive and accepting world, or we use it to empower, as separate to, personal and collective identities and intentions at the expense of others. I mean, we can see this in the world. And of course, both of these directions will be taken up by individuals, groups, and entities, simultaneously. Thinking about Jupiter also going into Aries is that it's in waxing square to the sun, and Mercury is in a waning quintile, and Mars is in a waxing quintile to Jupiter. So Jupiter's opportunities and challenges to the sustainment of our personal sense of purpose and power gives a creative crisis between what we have built up as our ego and towards how we are expanding ourselves. And Mercury's waning quintile to Jupiter is a call for creative transformation of thinking and communication, called up for by however one is expanded into transpersonal realms. But we have to keep in mind that this exists on an individual and collective levels. And then Mars in waxing quintile aspect of Jupiter is also a call to creative transformation. So, we're being called for a lot of things, as was mentioned. There's so much going on during this time.
Daniel, I'm going to let Bradley speak first because I think Bradley was next.
Okay. Thank you. So, yeah, one of the things that I guess I found really fascinating about this chart in terms of in evolutionary astrology, we focus on the Mars-Pluto cycle quite a bit, and Mars coming into opposition to Pluto is very significant at the halfway point. I noticed that this last summer in August, we had, of course, just at the start of August, that North Node Uranus-Mars conjunction that shook up a lot of things. And to me, it was kind of like there was this momentum. And as Mars was approaching that opposition, but it never got there yet because of this long retrograde period. So to me, it's felt, and then we've had all these retrograde planets. It's kind of felt like we've had a lot brewing that hasn't come forward and come out yet. So I see this full phase opposition when we finally reach this pretty significant in the sense of, I think a lot of people have been having a lot of stuff inside that they want to come forward, they want to come out and express it. And of course, Pluto in EA then is ruler of the Scorpio South Node. Mars traditionally is ruler of the Scorpio South Node. I mean, and we have both are squaring the nodes. And I just did want to say briefly that one of the things that I found really fascinating as we're wrapping up the Scorpio Taurus nodal transit, I mean, for a lot of this period, we have had Saturn in Aquarius squaring the nodes, and relative to Saturn's square to the nodes, the resolution node has been Scorpio with this ongoing square for this period. So to finish this transit of the nodes towards Scorpio with Pluto now squaring from Aquarius, again, the resolution is the Scorpio South Node. And so to translate this, what I've been thinking about a lot is, yes, we're called to this Taurian path, of course. We're called to deeply connect with ourselves relative to Uranus and Taurus, really connect with our authentic selves. Who are we? What are our values? obviously in EA, the first thing that we talk about with Taurus is survival. And when we look at the state of the world and the planet, we've got 8 billion people. How do you survive self-sufficiency and self-reliant? And so that's my kind of spin on that, is if the resolution is the Scorpio South Node for a lot of this period, there's this call for cooperation. There's a call to come together, to rely on each other. It's like, we're not meant to be self-sufficient in the way that we survive in this little bubble separate from other people. To get resources, we kind of need to come back to the Scorpio point, or even a way of personal Taurus self-healing. I think that we're still called to come back to merge and connect with something more powerful outside ourselves. And there's a little tension in that axis right now, to say the least, and there's been. So I just wanted to draw a light to how it's kind of going out with this re-emphasis on this square to the nodes.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Bradley. Daniel, you're next. Let me just say for our listeners, the nodal axis switches on July 13th of 2023. On July 13th, it moves to North Node in Aries, South Node Libra, and they are transiting those signs through January 11th of 2025. Daniel, you're not on my screen again. Did you have some comments?
Yeah, a couple of things I want to say. I'd like to talk a little bit about Jupiter and Aries. Michael brought it up. This shift, Jupiter just ingressed Aries yesterday. We're just beginning this ingress, and it's only going to be 5 months long. It's relatively short, and we're going to have Taurus coming up in the spring. But it's a major leap. We're moving from Pisces to Aries. We're going from water to fire. We're going from a mutable sign to a cardinal sign, and we're going to feel that change in the world around us. It's hard to forget that Mars and Aries are aggressive and self-centered and really quite different than the compassion and universal love that is expressed through Pisces. It's a huge change. The nodes are going to come and second all that midway through the year. The fable, the fable of the frogs in the stew pot. There's these frogs who are in this big pot of water, and the water is being heated from beneath them, but they're not, one turns to the other and says, "Do you smell something cooking?" To a great degree, I feel like that's the state of the world that we're in. And I wonder if we really have the wherewithal or the foresight or the intuitive sense to recognize what's really going on, rather than looking at everything with some kind of wishful thinking and thinking that somebody's going to come along and save us. I don't think anybody's coming to save us, and I think to a great degree that's what the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio have been about, is the recognition that we need to save ourselves. We need to empower ourselves. Uranus has been plowing through Taurus, showing us what's really essential. When COVID emerged, the word that was the catchword of the entire 2-year period was essential business, and that has not gone away. And we now have all this Taurus energy. Some of the charts I have 6 and 7 bodies and asteroids and lunar nodes in Taurus. We're not moving away from Taurus and Scorpio by any stretch of the imagination. But as we move into Aries, we're going to need to empower ourselves. We're going to need to take responsibility for ourselves. We can't sit back and think that something's going to come along and all of a sudden magically heal all of the issues that, like you say, have been 6,000 years in the making. For whatever reason, we have chosen to be here now to be part of this. And most of us, all of us certainly sitting in this room, and those of us who are attending this, are probably, the upper, 2, 3, 4, 5% of the population who over many lifetimes have begun to wake up and recognize that they really, are of what's going on. Most of the world is way behind. And it's going to not only it's going to take us, working with them in our case, one-on-one, if as many of the people who come to us or doing this kind of group work. But I see it, again, I see it as a huge shift that's occurring. Over the next couple of years, it's not just Pluto moving into Aries, but we're going to have Pluto moving to Aquarius, but we're going to have Neptune ingressing Aries as well. And that's going to be a very, very long transit. One of the things that, just to jump to, you brought up the US Pluto return. I just want to speak to that. Since 2014, and I've been talking about this since that date, Uranus has been squaring, Eris has been squaring Pluto. And the Pluto Eris square, which really hasn't occurred in Aries and Capricorn, hasn't occurred in 2,700 years. It's quite a rare occurrence in these cardinal signs. Because of that, it's a quite impactful event. And I see it as the foundational cause for all of this disruption and change that's happening. Everything that's really going on, under the hood astrologically for the time period that we're passing through. But if you take this Eris Pluto square and you overlay it on any of the US charts, an interesting, and I use the word interesting in quotation marks, realization comes to mind. Because though the mundane transit has been from 2014 and will last till 2024, it's a 10-year transit. For the U.S. chart, it began in 1983 with the Reagan years, and it's going to stretch out into the 2040s and 2050s because Pluto is stationary in the U.S. chart. It's not moving. And Eris only moves through 1 degree every 4 years. So this is a very long transit. We've had the 7 years or 10 years that we've had this Pluto Eris transit. It has not yet perfected. From let me just look at my notes here just so I get the dates right. From 2026 to 2030. It's going to perfect 9 times. 9 times.
Transiting
Okay.
Eris to the natal USA Pluto.
Yes, 9 times.
Just reiterating.
9
Wow.
times. Yeah.
And those dates again are 2026?
2026 to 2030. And it moves out
Oh.
of orb in 2030.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you for that heads up.
So,
Keep going.
So in addition to that, we've got Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus rules Aquarius. It's the archetype that follows Capricorn. Well, Capricorn structures things. It's Earth. Things get crystallized. What happens in Aquarius? Aquarius comes along and shakes up that crystallization, shatters it, so something else can happen. This is what I'm expecting. I'm not expecting unicorns, guys. I get my drift. And also, when I looked historically at Jupiter in Aries, previous Jupiter in Aries ingresses, and I'm gonna give you the list. I'm just gonna run through this. The War of 1812, Mexican-American War, World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. On the good side, on the happy side, it was the Louisiana Purchase, Manifest Destiny, the Transcontinental Railroad, Panama Canal, the Wright brothers, the Model T, Ford, Charles Lindbergh's flight, and Amelia Earhart. But it was also the assassination of JFK. It was Watergate and Columbine and Deepwater Horizon. It was the birth of the KKK, the Spanish flu, and Joseph McCarthy. Okay. But it also brought a CBS, Microsoft, Apple, Barack Obama, the jazz singer, Brown versus the Board of Ed, and the Civil Rights Act. It's a real mixed bag. but we're also moving into the other inconvenient truth of Uranus moving into Gemini in the next couple of years. And every time that you know this, Kim Marie is shaking her head. Every time Uranus has been in Gemini, the United States has gone to war. So we have to wake up to these realities, these astrological realities. We can't change, these cycles. They are real, and what we're living through is clearly the preamble to all of these events unfolding.
And if I may, just to follow up briefly, is transiting Neptune opposition to the natal USA, Neptune in Virgo, regardless of what time you use on July 4th, and squaring the natal USA Mars in Gemini. It's like this opposition is giving us an opportunity to get our heads out of the sand, but instead we have to go into these culture wars of denying what we're going to teach children about history and etc. You probably don't need any more examples if you're doing any observations of what's going on here on planet Earth. So yeah, I'm an eternal optimist, but I agree with you.
The last Neptune opposition what took place during the American Civil War.
Yeah.
I mean, the history is irrefutable.
Yeah, exactly. And something else that sparked, even though we're on the USA chart, but when we were looking earlier to the Mars-Pluto opposition coming this summer, and the stellium of Taurian planets, and Taurus being the Earth and the physical resources, and whoever mentioned 8 billion people on the planet. I like to quote these two statistics. Many of us know that the US has now 4% of the world's population. However, we use 25% of the material goods that are produced every year in the planet. Out of that 25% of goods that the US uses, the upper 10% of income spends 40% of that. So again, USA, 25% of the world's resources consumed every year. The upper 10% has almost half of that. There's another one of those Pluto and Aquarius shakeups that might come along over the next 20 years. Who knows how? But the rest of the planet can't live like the US does. So, when's there going to be one of those tipping points, so to speak? Anybody else? Comments, questions? We're kind of moving into the Jupiter and Aries Taurus. I use the Munchausen chart. And by the way, let me do one more thing. This will hopefully be in the PowerPoint slide on EA Zoom. I don't know if they're live hyperlinks, but this is the article that recaps all Michael's research on the birth of the United States. And you can see right here, this is a synopsis of it. He goes into a lot more detail on that, but this is a starting point if you would like to look at some of this for yourself. And after looking at this myself for a couple of years, it's where I changed to this time period on July 4th. Just wanting to give you background information. Any comments on the
Kim Marie?
US? Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the description and
Sure.
Underneath the YouTube video. And I'm wondering, can you see that people have their hands raised?
No, I don't. I'm not paying any attention to that. Apologies. I'm used to my other partner when we do webinars to interrupt me. So
Okay.
there's some questions coming through.
Yeah, we have Michael and then Martha and then Bradley wanting to talk.
I want to follow through with what Daniel was saying, which was very important.
Go ahead.
As Jupiter traverses Aries for 5 months, it's going to cross over the slower Chiron and Eris. And then meanwhile, you're going to have Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus also crossing these points. And whatever ways that Jupiter's expansion and magnification will bring to wounds, violations, and vulnerabilities, they can also help, of course, to bring healing and encourage us to look beyond ourselves. And this is the opportunity to ask the Parzival question. Does everyone know the legend of Parzival and the Grail, Holy Grail?
Sure, please.
Yeah, well, just basically, he was at the point of attaining the Holy Grail, and the fact that he did not ask a certain question of the Grail King, who had a wound that, he had well, for many years he had this wound, and he did not ask the question, "What ails thee?" And so he was not able to get the Grail at that time. So, we have an opportunity to ask this question of everyone around us, in whatever ways, which is required to achieve this Holy Grail by giving service to others. And so are we awake enough to ask this question of others, of other countries? The asserting of self out of fear and attempting to be first at everything will be an overcompensation. So Eris points to where and how we need to gain strength and courage to face the world. And just a brief thing on Eris, it's going to be in Aries for 25 more years. And this is closing this particular cycle, the 560-year cycle. So this is pointing, in Aries, pointing to its connection to humanity's evolving individuated consciousness. Think of the European Renaissance and Reformation. And the beginning of the cycle coincided with the rise of individuation, especially in relation to the rise of technological progress. This sinking deeper into materialistic thought, inventiveness, and the ensuing lifestyles that arose out of that primarily affects our thinking and how we enter into the world. And Eris gives recognition of our own and others' personifications of positive qualities, resourcefulness, and the desire for self-improvement. But to whatever degree this recognition is not given, feelings of jealousy, rivalry, strife, all this arises. So the goddess of discord arises, and we still have a ways, as Daniel was saying, to evolve beyond this impulsive personhood. And all this will gain an intensity and importance as Pluto goes through Aquarius, I think.
Thank you. Next, I can see Martha with a hand up.
That's me and then Bradley.
All right.
Yeah, so I had a few thoughts also about what Daniel was saying and related things. So when I hear that perspective of there being cycles and it's going to repeat and all that, I mean, yes. And I, of course, don't really like a fatalistic perspective. So I tend to think of it ideally as not going around in a circle that's just going to repeat itself, but more like a spiral or something. And so of course we have some level of ourselves being these energies. They're energies that are moving, that are reflected in the astrology, but really the reality is ourselves. So one of the things that I think has potential here to get us on a spiral as opposed to a circle that goes nowhere is, for example, this year when the nodes of the moon change sign and Pluto is squaring the nodes exactly as the nodes change, the nodes are going into Aries and Libra. And to me, among other things, that feels so powerful for the potential to for Pluto to assist us essentially in dissolving our relationship to polarities, dissolving our constructs around gender, sexuality, relationships, all of that Aries Libra stuff. And then I look at, like you were talking about, Eris, and some of the other goddesses. And what I noticed, for example, is in the eclipses in the fall of 2023, Eris is going to be precisely on the north node of the moon. And guess who's going to be on the south node? Is Lilith, the asteroid. So Eris will be on the north node, exactly opposite Lilith on the south node. So to me, they're both bringing in what I think is happening in a lot of us, and certainly I can speak for myself, this reality that as we're rebalancing, as we're dissolving how we approach gender constructs, how we all, none of us want this patriarchal hurt. Nobody of any gender wants it, really. I mean, some people do, but all of us sitting here don't want it. I could just guess that. And so when as we're collectively working pretty hard to dissolve that, again, speaking for myself, but I think it's probably true for all of you, there's two sides to it, right? There's the perspective that the masculine has perpetrated these negative things. Okay, sure, true. And again, speaking for myself, but I feel this in a lot of people who are also, identifying with their feminine side, either identifying as a woman or also identifying as any gender, but feeling that feminine in them, is this the coming forward of the quote unquote dark feminine, right? Which with Eris on the north node, Lilith on the south node, it's like we have the potential to lean into that and really come into the reality that, let's say, the feminine has a role too, to step up, like to reclaim our power, to just be it, like not in a I need to destroy you kind of a way, but in a I'm going to be here. I'm going to be present. And I'm going to not play the victim. I'm not going to play the perpetrator either. I'm just going to be the goddess in full power with the God in full power, with the non-binary, with the everything in its full power, as who we are. And I don't think we've done that for at least thousands of years. So to me, even just that takes us from a repetitive circle and pops us up a notch to hopefully do a spiral, in some positive way. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that will be the challenge for all of humanity as we release the patriarchal distortions, because they are unsustainable for planet Earth. I agree that I think the challenge is going to be, can we go to the balance of the center rather than any of the pendulum swings? Because we know both genders can be distorted, and so here's to that hope and that intent for all of us. Thank you. Thank you. And Bradley, you were next.
Yeah. Could I share my screen for a quick sec too?
You sure can. Go for it.
Yeah, this is another layer to what we were talking about. Here's a list of the heliocentric planetary nodes, and I have Chiron on here. And if you notice, there's south node of Chiron is 29 Aries 27, and the north node obviously 29 Libra 27. Now, so keep that in mind. Now, next piece I wanted to share with you is this little thing that I discovered when I was working on this book with Darlene Tate that we never finished, but I discovered that Chiron's orbit and its nodes are really fascinating, because the south node of Chiron at the last degree of Aries is almost out to Uranus's orbit, and then that north node of Chiron here is all the way up into Saturn's orbit. I think that's really, there's a lot that could be said just on this alone, you know, and I just really briefly, like obviously Chiron's life started with a lot of trauma and wounding, and while he did learn a lot from Apollo, he did a lot of self-healing too. And so in the geocentric nodes, these nodes basically go between, so the south node would go between Aries and Taurus each year. So the south node of Chiron's in Aries or Taurus in the geocentric half the year, almost, you know, a little more in the Aries. But the idea that in the model that we have for EA with the pyramid of consciousness and the individuated unconscious, this Uranian realm is this huge part of the iceberg below the surface, right? And so this idea that the south node of Chiron, these deep wounds, 30 last degree of Aries, are deep in the individuated unconscious, or collective unconscious for that matter, right? And we're going to have this transited, you know, and Jupiter is going to cross this point, right? Eris is getting close to this point. So I wanted to kind of throw the nodes of Chiron on there. And the other one thing that I think is really interesting to add to the conversation too is that in winter of 1977, when Swami Shri Yukteswar brought this core of the EA paradigm and this dream to Jeffrey Wolf Green, Chiron was at the end of Aries, conjunct the lunar south node, conjunct the south node of Chiron. Triple conjunction there. So Chiron, south node of Chiron at the start of this EA paradigm, which means that this paradigm that we practice at that time, the Libra north node would have been conjunct the heliocentric north node of Chiron in Libra. I think that speaks a lot to what the EA paradigm is about, and also having this Jupiter activation. So, and the nodal activation of this, I think, is really significant for EA this year. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Oh, thank you for those tidbits, Bradley. I appreciate that. So we are just shy of 90 minutes in. Daniel, go ahead. I was just going to say, any more comments before we go for a short break?
Okay, I just want to speak to what Martha was saying. Martha, we are on a spiral. It may be hard to see, but we're definitely spiraling up. But one of the core teachings of EA is the concept that we grow through crisis. It's human nature to remain the same. We seek security, and security is what's familiar, and we will hold on to a job, a relationship, a situation that we're in, even when we know it doesn't work, because what's out there is even scarier. So it takes 2 years of COVID. It takes a Donald Trump. It takes Vladimir Putin threatening to use nukes. It takes these kinds of things to push us forward and rattle our cage and shake us out of the lethargy and comfort level that we have settled into.
Yes. Anybody else? A thought that was sparking for me, just in general, as we've been making all of these comments, is in the United States, with the Republicans taking control of our House of Representatives, we are apparently going to have, what do they call them? Investigations, oversights or something into the Afghanistan war and how we left. And, you know, there may be some legitimates to that. But I also think on a broad level, it's going to just bring up these memories of how we got into the war in Afghanistan on some false premises. And I wonder, with the aspects that Daniel was speaking to with Eris and Pluto, I wonder if perhaps there might be a mass consciousness in the US that goes, we're tired of war. Why do we have to, you know, invest in wars all over? We've, you know, invested resources into Ukraine in the David and Goliath fight right now, but that's just like far away. We don't send any soldiers over there. So we have this period of time almost where, we haven't really had that physical investment into soldiers on the ground, even though, we got bases all over the world. So again, my point is that I wonder if here in the US, with this Pluto return as well, we might be coming to this massive consciousness that, wait a minute, why do we fight these massive wars when there are other places we could put our resources towards? Who knows? Stay tuned. Any other comments before we take a short little break?
I think I'll just speak again to Daniel and just say, yes, I agree with what you're saying. And I would then emphasize the opportunity for us to lean into the change as opposed to, just expect it, like bad things are going to hit us or something. That the purpose behind it, ideally, hopefully, is that we are moving forward in some way. And so we have something we can lean into as opposed to just getting scared. And I'm not saying, Daniel, that you're saying we should get scared. I'm just saying this for people listening, that would be what I would advocate as leaning into the change and the potential of the growth as opposed to the fear of it.
Change is hard.
Evolution is painful, and evolution will happen, but there's freedom for everyone to choose whatever they're going to do with it. So it's not going to be easy, but it's moving forward.
The chick has to fight its way out of the egg.
Yeah, and having given birth twice, you can push it out or you can let the baby birth itself, right? So that, yes, and it's torture in the meantime. Labor is just torture, it just is. But you can go.
Most of the world is not like us, though. That's the problem. They're guys who want to take their big trucks and drive through parades. We are a rare commodity.
Karma holds sway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hey, everybody, please check your clocks. We're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll come back and start again 5 minutes with our Venus retrograde in Leo later this year.
Okay.
Everyone, welcome back. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from our short little break with some more Mars retrograde and Gemini techno troubles that we power through. And so switching subjects, I've realized that I did not do any charts up on Venus retrograde, the retrograde cycle. I have the dates, etc. So if any of our panelists out there have any Venus retrograde charts, you are welcome to share your screen and we'll use your charts. Do we have anybody who has already made those charts up? I can quick draw one, but I'll let anybody else go.
I just brought it up.
Go ahead.
We're not
Thank you,
seeing you
Daniel.
sharing it, Daniel.
Yeah, no, it's going to take me a minute to do it.
Okay, all right. Oh, okay, I see. You said you just brought it up, so now, okay,
I know, I just brought up the chart.
okay, we'll wait.
Come on. Whoops. There we go. Can you see that? Oh, I didn't
Yes.
share it. Did I share it? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it, Daniel.
Great.
And
Oh, great.
so you did transits for July 22nd, and this is Venus stationary retrograde, correct?
Right. I like
Okay.
to isolate the planet in question.
Sure, go ahead. Anybody else want to go ahead and speak up, or Daniel, do you want to start?
No, I haven't really, I brought it up because I haven't really looked at it too much. So I just was looking at it. It's, yeah, no, let somebody else jump in.
I have a little bit on this. So from this time, through September, beginning September the 3rd, Venus is retrograde in between 28 degrees and 12 degrees Leo. And it starts off with a waxing trine to the lunar north node in Taurus, and the waxing in conjunction, or no, a waxing trine, the lunar node, and waxing in conjunction to Neptune in Pisces. Along with that, a waning in conjunction to Pluto in Capricorn. Then it moves on to a waxing square to Jupiter in Taurus. And a little bit of thinking I did about this is that the Venus retrograde in the last half of Leo, trining to the lunar node towards the end of July and beginning of August, this is calling us to, this is internalization of values and ideals. And it's necessary for this to establish and reestablish different patterns of how we set our values and ideals, how we're going to put them out in the world. And you can see this possibly, well, you can see it happening, the seeds for it now with there's a impulse to reestablish, the rule of law in the United States. The whole Trump phenomena has brought this out, it's sort of like the necessary catalyst for this. It's far from over, but it seems to be moving forward towards that. But of course, like I said, it's far from over. Also with Venus, with Venus, while this is happening, this is the time when Jupiter has gone into Taurus, right? And so Jupiter, we expand and compensate it through the assimilation of the last cycle while it was in Aries, okay? And becomes focused in Aries on how to be a self-sustaining, conscious individual in a social context now in Taurus. And our expansion moves from the principle of individual will, the Aryan individual will, towards self-exertion as we, identify with substance, for the purpose of self-substantiation in the world. And, besides the physical things, substance also means our values, and upon what and how we ground our self-worth and find meaning and purpose, through our productively implementing our values in life. And so the ruler, Venus, will be in Cancer at this time. And so the establishment of values and ideals and meaning is integrated to create a concrete sense of selfhood and security, and a sense of assuming responsibility toward others, so we can, consciously participate in relationships. Just one more thing, that Venus is in waxing trine to Saturn and waxing quintile to Jupiter. So values that have been focalized and individualized through Saturn are being creatively transformed through its quintile to Jupiter. And there's a feeling of readiness for actualization, but there's still a pull from the past. So there's not a real a grounded. I think it's going to take some time for there to be a groundedness for moving forward.
Thank you, Michael. Martha, I saw that you wanted to have a couple comments.
Yeah. So yeah, I can just add to that. So when I look at this, what I'm seeing is not, like Michael said, when Venus goes retrograde, it's going to be trining the north node of the moon. but also at that moment, that same exact week, is when the nodes of the moon are going to just have switched signs, and Pluto will be exactly squaring the nodes of the moon for about like 6 days. Is going to be the back and forth. There's going to be an exact squaring of the nodes by Pluto over a pretty long period of time there. And then something not on this chart, but that is true, is that Venus, as it goes retrograde, is also going to be opposite Eros, not Eris, Eros. So Venus in Leo trining the node of the north node of the moon opposite Eros. I mean, just Venus in Leo opposite Eros. Just that brings up for me, of course, like this life force energy that is all of us. And so as we are moving through this incredibly transformative time and moment and year and process, it feels like there's this infusion of again coming back to our body, ourself as Eros, ourself as the Venusian embodied way of that part of our reality that is actually a huge part of our reality, that we are bodies, we're earth bodies that are made from Eros, that are made from the life force energy of source. And so again, as we're trying to feel our way through this transformation and doing our very, very, very best, to move through it the best way we can, I think it's again bringing us back to, we can't do this through our mind. It's going to be, it needs to be embodied. We need to let go into that life force energy that we are, and that's going to help us. It might feel like we're moving, like in, but that's the way we're going to move out.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Bradley, let me have a comments from Bradley. Starting to our flow.
This starts wild.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting. I just wanted to point out again that the north node at this time is conjunct the south node of Chiron, and that south node of Chiron is way out by the orbit of Uranus. So I do see this moment as a call for us to really, there's going to be an activation and a call to kind of have the courage to go deep into whatever still needs to be healed. And obviously there's new traumas going on now, let alone the last 8,000 years, and so there's a lot of deep hurt and pain there, and it's wanting to be healed. And with Pluto square the nodes in this chart, Venus being the ruler of the resolution Libra South node, and that Libra South node being on the north node of Chiron, I think that, and like I was saying, like that north node of Chiron is in this orbit of Saturn. So I think in the social setting, in societies, this level of sharing, and because Venus is in Leo in the chart, I would see a lot of like performance, theatrics, live music, a lot of just people coming out and fully expressing themselves and sharing and being witnessed could be the catalyst that we need for some of this healing to take place. Like the wounds, the dramas, they need expression. And so there's just a lot of potency and potential for this to happen. Obviously, Venus is at the point of that yod. There's a lot of tension in the moment too. It's high energy. Pretty wild station.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Next, Daniel. I see your hand, Daniel.
Yeah, great. I'm seeing that there's a lot of pressures on our priorities. We're really being driven to realize what we've done in the past needs some work, and to work towards a different future. And Saturn these are all pressure points. Everything here is really pushing us forward to realign our priorities, what's really important to us. And it's spurring a tremendous self-actualization process as well. What really strikes me is how Venus is sandwiched in between Pallas and Mercury. the higher mind and the lower mind, and moving, through the last degree of Leo into Virgo. And, Virgo is the, scrubbing clean is making us recognize what it is about ourselves that we need to work on. And the station, I think, really emphasizes that, especially with in conjunct to Pluto. Pluto's definitely, putting this, almost like, stepping on our hand or something and saying, hey, listen, you've just got to make some changes here because we can't go on in the direction that we're going.
Anybody else? We all spoke up? Everything? I'm going to back us up for just a moment. Just in case we have any, newer listeners to evolutionary astrology. When a planet goes retrograde, it is about throwing off the consensus conditioning factors of that archetype and allowing it to more naturally express itself on its own individual nature. And so Venus in Leo, it can be similar to other planets when they go through Leo, but Venus in Leo, if we look at it from a consensus perspective many times, especially when it's wounded, who will love me? And what games do I have to play? Or how do I act out in order for you to love me? Or put me first in your world? See me on top of everything, that Leonian energy that wants to suck all the oxygen up in a room. And so when Venus goes retrograde, and every retrograde planet will point to its polarity, the polarity is Aquarius. And so it's asking us to just step back from the immediacy of our environments and try to take a larger picture of whatever we find ourselves in the midst of on a personal level. And if we do that, then we can hopefully recognize everybody wants to be seen, everybody wants to be loved, everybody has something creative to express on planet Earth. And when we can find that energy, within ourselves, and when we can accept that Aquarian polarity of difference, then we allow our natural creativity and love to come out. We accept it in others. And so that's going to be an overall message of whenever Venus is in Leo. And so when we can reach for that deep love of ourselves on an inward level, we allow however it needs to be expressed in the outer world to come through naturally. And as we can see, just looking at the stationary retrograde here, there with the cardinal planets squaring the cardinal nodal axis, there can be a lot of insecurities that can be pushed right now. And they can be the animus gender insecurities. There could be that kind of stuff coming up in the news again. As we look at these aspects to the Tautorian planets that Venus is going to square during that retrograde cycle, it could bring up the resource issues. There can be all kinds of security triggers that this Venus retrograde cycle is going to ask all of us to walk through on a very personal level. And if we take that same energy and those same archetypes then and expand them onto a broader collective level, we're going to have collective insecurities going on. My race is better than your race. My group is better than your group. There's only so many resources on the planet and I want my share. The distortions of this Venus retrograde. So I could probably talk about this chart for an hour as I look at these stationary retrograde aspects, but I just wanted to back us up for a moment and kind of allow maybe some new people to see this. And anybody else wants to feed off of my comments, you're more than welcome to, as we all look at this chart and Whew, help Venus love ourselves.
I had a question that I wanted to ask before Brad has to leave.
Sure.
Yes, I really love what you're saying, and I personally love to think of Leo, like, in its highest expression, of course, as being, I am the flower that is the expression of the divine, and so are you, and so are you, and so are you, and so are you, and then we have this ultimate relationship with the sun, which is helping us to open, to fully bloom, to be that, right? And it's so that's that. Then it's that Aquarian thing that we are all needed to shine as our full selves. So that's in response to you. But then I have this other question. When I look at this also, Venus is going to be, Venus is currently the ruler of the North Node. And I really loved, Bradley, what you said about the resolution node currently being the South Node. And it will continue to be the South Node, but the ruler of the South Node will then be Venus, right? So I'm just thinking about that as we're thinking about Venus going retrograde right as the nodes switch and Pluto is squaring the nodes of the moon. I'm just curious if you or anyone else has any thoughts about any of that.
Bradley.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a great point. I loved Kim Marie's context, and obviously we can imagine that. I slightly off topic, but like just going past into the Mars Pluto full phase, and then we have this Venus and Leo. If this polarity of Aquarius isn't part of the evolution of this Venus, I mean, some of the Libra extremism that we'll see, and maybe this does connect to what you're saying, because obviously Libra is a sign of extremes, and then just coming into these full phase aspects with Pluto. I think that coming from everything brewing and percolating through the fall, winter, we might see in the summer some really extremism come out in behavior that's really self-centered and like Kim Marie was saying, each individual's the center of their world and they want what they want, and we need to think about there's resources for everyone on the planet. So that's I guess that's one thought. Obviously with the Jupiter going into Taurus, sustainability and Earth energy getting really big again. So we haven't left the Taurus emphasis at all, but I guess I just wonder if maybe the Venus is going to come out as seen more in extreme ways than less grounded ways. I don't know. Want to hear what other people say.
Sure. Let me just take a moment. Thank you, Martha, for reminding me Bradley had to leave early. And so, Bradley, on behalf of all of us, thank you for showing up. For me personally, it was wonderful to see you again. Bradley makes beautiful mandalas on Facebook if anybody wants to go check out some of his artwork. And so, again, just thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you. It's really great to be here with you all. Appreciate it.
Sure. What sparked for me quickly listening to Martha was that as we have that North Node in Taurus, if we're really working on all of the Venusian self-love, self-reliance lessons right now, then when that transiting South Node goes into Libra, then Venus can evolve its relationships. However, if we're not working on that self-reliance or that ability to sustain ourselves or have that relationship with ourselves, then this Venus retrograde and that South Node in Libra can bring up some of what Bradley was saying, in addition to me, all the insecurities that then bring up all of the relationship extremes of, neediness and control, or even the infidelity stuff that can come through with this. So it'll be that interesting transition to see if our relationships evolve with the nodal axis shift or if they degrade. Michael, Daniel, carry on, comments.
Well, just going off of what you're saying, that when Jupiter ingresses into Taurus, it's going to be in a waxing opposition to Pluto, or waxing square to Pluto. And so these individual evolutionary intentions, are really, they must be brought into the social realm. Okay. And so, for a lot of people who are really working on themselves, especially new insights may arise spontaneously, but also through clashing desires or confrontations with relationships, social structures. But these exist, so we can learn how to communicate effectively, yeah, and to reject any points of view that are not in alignment with spiritual, alignment and progress. However, rejection may be based on defending one's own cherished thoughts, this holding on to the past, cherished thoughts, points of views and philosophies. And it's only because these hold a sense of security and identity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm thinking about what you were saying, Kim.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Daniel.
No. I don't have anything to add. I think you guys have really said it all. I agree with everything that you've said.
Something else that had just sparked for me, I don't know how many of you follow the whole cycle of phases and aspects, but it was, I want to say it was 2017 to 21, something like that. Uranus made 7 waxing biseptiles to Pluto, the 102-degree mark. And so it'll now move into in the late 20s in Gemini Aquarius to make these waxing trines. But we still have Uranus in Taurus. And now that Pluto's going to go into Aquarius, it's going to kind of bring back that, waxing square energy. And with Jupiter joining it, making that conjunction and then moving beyond Uranus into new phase, part of me can see some real technological innovations come through. I personally have been waiting for nuclear fusion for a long time, and I may have to be in my next lifetime before I actually get to partake in using it, but I have been waiting for that technology to come through. And so I see that kind of sparks coming with Jupiter and Uranus to Pluto over 2023. And so then I think as we move into this Venus retrograde and its rulership of Jupiter and Uranus, it's going to spark again all these distortions of, will we have, selective creativity where the, upper 1%, 10% in the world get to have all these extremes and they all start flying around in space and taking their vacations there? Or will we, start to recognize that, hey, we've got to have a sustainable planet for all of us because you guys don't get to go live on Mars yet. So I'm just, kind of free forming off of this Venus retrograde, but it's kind of making me look back at these outer planets, Jupiter, Uranus to Pluto, in this building energy between them. And Venus is going, I'm going to have a say in this over the summer. And then one more thing, and I have a little hit list for it, but I don't need to bring it up. I just want to point out to everybody, the end of July, and when Venus goes retrograde, and the end of August, in the midst of its retrograde cycle, that second half of those 2 months are very, very, very active. You can see on your screen here that Mars opposition to Saturn that's going on. The Sun opposes Pluto. Chiron goes retrograde. The squares of the nodes. All of those things happen the end of July, and then we also have the end of August. Mars then goes on to oppose Neptune, and Sun opposes Saturn. And so there's a lot of active planetary hits during the Venus retrograde cycle that will have its own dance with this Venus retrograde, asking us, my values or shared values. How do we all play in this sandbox that we have?
Mhm.
Daniel, go.
Yeah. Actually, what's caught my eye, first I want to say thank you. You've kind of given me some insights into my solar return, which is late July. Thank you. But I'm looking at the Chiron stationed and an Eris retrograde conjunct the North Node. I use a wide orb for the nodes. I'll sometimes use up to 15 degrees. And so again, we've got this impetus, this pressure is not quite the right word. There's a lot of weight there on that North Node to Eris, and excuse me, ladies, but Eris is the woman scorned. Okay, I mean, there's no question. And so she's all about, righting that injustice. She was blamed for the Trojan War, but from a lot of the reading that I have done, there's an awful lot of opinions that it was really Helen. It wasn't Eris at all. But that's just a side issue. But the point is that she's all about righting an injustice, right? Responding to an offense. She doesn't just turn the other cheek. She does something about it. She has to balance the scales, if you would. And then we've got Chiron there, stationed, just this receptacle of all the wounds and hurts and pain that has been suffered. And this is all being brought to the North Node in order to help us really reimagine not only reimagine the past and reframe it and understand that the crises and the wounds were really all about our own, long-term healing and to get rid of these burdens that we've probably carried, forward for lifetimes. But now to embed them, into how we really want to create the future. To not keep repeating the past as the present and then letting that past become the future again, to change that pattern so that the future really becomes different than what the past has been. And it needs this anger, if you would. It needs this energetic bundle of emotion in order to move it off the point on which it's stuck.
Sue made the comment in the chat screen. It was pointed out yesterday that Eris just threw the apple. The gods chose to go to war. So I wanted to just mention that for any listeners in the future. Any other comments from Michael, Martha?
Yeah, I do. Just talking about Eris, that particular myth, that archetype, also got played out into the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty, and the godmother, that was not invited to the birth of the princess. She came anyway, and she fell out of her scorn. She laid her curse upon the baby. But it's there's even in that there is the hope, that plays out in the end when you have the coming together of masculine and feminine energies, in harmony. That the dragon is overcome, everybody who's asleep in the castle, and all the thorn bush around the castle is all fades away. So it's an interesting transformation of that particular Greek story.
Yeah, it was Eris and Pallas Athena who burned Troy to the ground. That's assuming that war actually took place. And again, there's some questions about it, but you read the Iliad, it's you get it's a really deep introspection into how the gods really the archetypes of how these gods play out.
And I just want to put in a plug that, Heather Ensworth is adamant to also point out that Eris was originally named Xena. And so it's a totally different energetic. It's a totally different storyline. And I don't know the story well enough to repeat it right now, but it is, to me, the archetype of Eris is really key and important and central to a lot of the dynamics going on our planet. Absolutely, for sure. And when I remember that she was originally called Xena, and there's this whole other storyline that also goes with that planetary body, it just brings in a lot of questions and a lot of reflection. And for anybody who's interested to go more deeply into that, I can send them a video from Heather Ensworth. But
she upsets the apple cart. I mean, even her discovery
Exactly.
is a perfect example of her archetype, because as a result of her discovery, Pluto was demoted.
Yep, exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of debate, even just among the astronomers.
right,
Yes,
right.
exactly. Yeah.
Sure appreciate all of you who take the time to read mythology and give me the Reader's Digest condensed version. I just want to do one little technical thing for people who are listening to this. The interior conjunction of Venus retrograde to the Sun is August 13th, and that takes place at 20 degrees Leo, 28 minutes, 2028 Leo. And then Venus goes stationary direct on September 3rd at 12:12 Leo, 12:12 Leo, Venus direct, September 3rd, so that you've got those little points there for you to look at or to consider in your Venus retrograde cycle. So I guess as we start to wind down, as I kind of look at the time here, shall we all just make a few closing comments? Would that be okay? Anybody would like to go first?
Well, I guess I will. I'm a moon in Aries, so I don't have a problem being first. I think it's all incumbent upon all of us to really use a Taurus statement, take the bull by the horns. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. I said it before, nobody's coming to save us. If we want to get through what I sense, intuitively we're facing in the next decade, is that we have to make ourselves as healthy as we can, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. That's our goal. And to basically, just be that role model in the world, take care of ourselves, and show by the way that we live that there is another way to be. It's the the 100th monkey. If all of us go out there and we start that parameter, put it out there, eventually we'll get there. The consciousness is being raised on the planet, and those of us who are beginning to recognize what's really happening around us, it's our responsibility to work with this and to further it and to teach it and speak about it and just be that in the world.
Thank you, Daniel. Michael?
Well, just thinking about just the difference, the change, from Aries, Jupiter going into Aries and Jupiter going into Taurus, that the expansiveness of Jupiter, it lives very positively in our ethics, our justice, our wisdom, and enthusiasm, right? And in Aries, the individual ego is really appealed to and is activated by opportunities that come to us from expanding out into the world, coming from outside the world, seems like, and from our inner impulse to expand out into the world. But the flip side of this are the experiences of challenges. And this calls us to exercise and expand our abilities as well as expanding, the expression of our abilities out into the world. So, Jupiter teaches us that the challenges are opportunities, right? And it gives us drive and courage. And, it can give us, it can manifest as hubris, blind overextension, over optimism, over positivity, overindulgence, and impulsiveness. Okay. So that's the whole Aryan thing, that these are the challenges from that. So when it, in May, when it goes into Taurus, there will be a change. And so what and how we've expanded and compensated through assimilation from the last cycle, and especially through its time in Aries, it now becomes focused on how to be a self-sustaining, conscious individual in the social context. And our expansion moves from the principle of the individual will, towards self-exertion as we identify with the substance, for the purpose of really manifesting ourselves in the world. And so, and I've said this before, that as we, besides dealing with physical things, the Taurian way wants to do, that the substance that we also work with are our values and how we ground our self-worth. And this is really a real basis to find meaning and productivity when we implement them in life. So we can do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Martha, comments?
Yeah. I made a whole video on my own YouTube channel if anybody wants to hear more about what I'm about to say. But for me, when the overall sense I have about the transits of the year at this moment in time, having not gone through them yet, is the Pluto squaring the nodes of the moon effective, exact in July, but really energetically effective. I feel it now personally, and it'll be within orb, a lot of the year. So for me, that energetic is about the metamorphosis experience. And like I've said a bunch of times in this panel discussion, I think that one of the questions that comes up is, okay, so how do we go through that experience in the way that's the most effective, I guess, and ideally the least painful? I don't know. We've all gone through that experience of being the caterpillar who goes into the chrysalis and then becomes the butterfly. We all are doing it all the time. I just think that's what life is. And we all have had times where we acutely feel, we know we're in that chrysalis, and it often sucks. It really can be a very painful experience. And I think there are ways, like I said, to move with the birth, move with the dissolving, as opposed to fight against it or deny it or XYZ choice. And one of the key, I think there's so many answers to that question of how do we do that most effectively, but one thing that I get brought back to over and over and over again, both in the astrology, but also in my own praying and my own connection with the spirit world, and also given my background as a therapist doing trauma work in particular, is that this world, big part of what we all feel and know is that this world is incredibly traumatized. We're all in the midst of chronic trauma on this planet. So as we're trying to transform, a huge component of it, I do feel like, is addressing the needs of our nervous system and addressing the needs of our trauma, our lived trauma, collectively, individually, all of the above. And one of the ways that I see the astrology, the cosmos, really supporting that in us is, among other things, this emphasis on the Taurus energies, the Jupiter going into Taurus, the retrogrades of Mercury in the earth signs. And I also love what Bradley said about the resolution node being the south node currently in Scorpio, and that being about, you know, shared resources as opposed to the individualistic possibilities of Taurus. But coming back into ourselves as earth is one way that we can learn how to remember that we can regulate, co-regulate literally with the planet earth, with the cosmos, come back into our earth bodies. That's a key way for us to address the needs of our nervous system and address the needs of our traumatized selves. So I see a lot of potential for that. Again, the remembering of ourselves as earth as a key component to helping us in this transformational time. And there's so much more, but that's the gist.
Thank you, Martha. I had one of the little things spark for me. We didn't address the fact that in Jupiter makes a lot of one-off aspects to, well, makes one-off aspects to each of the outer planets. However, with Neptune, Jupiter makes 3 waxing semi-squares through its retrograde cycle over the next year, 15 months. And the waxing semi-square is 45 degrees. It's moving from new phase to crescent phase. And that's the germination point, and which we really want to build up that energy to bring forth the new. All 3 of those aspects will occur when Jupiter is in Taurus and Neptune is in Pisces. And if you remember, Jupiter and Neptune had one conjunction, I want to say early last spring, 2020, about 24 degrees Pisces. You know, and we talked about that, you know, lower and higher octave of spirituality with Jupiter and Neptune. And so to me, I'm looking at these waxing semi-squares as, you know, being a choice point of how we are going to move forward, putting our energy into, you know, being spiritual beings on this physical planet. And so even though Pluto's only going to go into Aquarius for 2.5 months next year, March 23rd, June 10th. Martha, you sparked me in remembering that Aquarius, ruled by Uranus, rules trauma on an individuated, unconscious level and on a collective level. And so when Pluto goes into Aquarius for those first few months next spring, we're all going to have trauma triggered individually and collectively. And so as we've talked about all that Taurian energy, we're either going to go to the insecure side and want to get mine so that I can be secure in this material world, or we recognize the ultimate source of all resources that comes on this planet. And when we can align with that, then we move forward from a more inwardly secure perspective. And we know that there is enough for all to go around in whatever way we want to choose to look at it. And so I kind of remind us of that, so that, again, coming back to the beginning, those Mercury retrogrades, we can remember where the ultimate source of everything comes from, and that we're going to be okay. And then we can use those Jupiter semi-squares to Neptune, you know, again, to find that inspiration to move us forward on the planet. And I don't remember who said it, you know, but to be in the world what we wish to see in the world. And so, you know, I think all of us today have been doing our best to impart that to you. So listening live or listening in the future, thank you again for tuning in to us and our thoughts. And on behalf of all the other speakers, we wish you all the best in 2023 and beyond, and just go be a creative dynamo in the world. Thank you. Oh, Daniel?
Best medicine for everybody Get out in nature.
Oh,
Can
I live in the mountains.
yes. Can
Go
I
ahead,
add
Marcia.
one thing?
Yep.
Get
Oh,
out in
go
nature.
ahead.
Get out in nature.
Yes, I triple that, Daniel.
Yeah.
But and remember we are nature too, that. But what I also wanted to say about resources, and something that's been coming through over and over and over again for me in my praying, and you're helping me understand why it's coming through, Kim, is the spirit world keeps reminding me that abundance is not about having a stash of gold. It's really actually about coming back into the flow, the natural ebb and flow of the natural state of being, which is like a sort of ridiculous version of explaining this is like the ocean has water and the waves go onto the shore and then back, right? Like the beach never holds the water on purpose and doesn't want to. I mean, sometimes there's a tidal pool, okay, sure, but then the tide will come all the way in and then the water goes back out, right? And that's actual real abundance, is the flow, not the hoarding, not having millions of dollars. I mean, that's fine to have millions of dollars, but that's not the point. That's not actually, I can speak for myself, not what I want. I want to feel balance, a balance of in and out. So yeah, I think there we go. Yes. Thank you.
Find some
It really
place where
has-
there are no. Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Michael. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just want to say briefly what you're saying, Martha. I mean, it really comes down to a real faith, okay, belief in that the spiritual world is holding us. You know, it's there, and you know, it's as much as we know that, you know, it's still easy to forget. You know, it's something to hold, and this is where we can gain great strength.
My last comment, find some place where there's no city lights and spend some time there.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again, everyone.
Awesome insights from a wonderful panel. You guys have done such a great job. And a little note before we continue, for anyone who has thought about presenting for EA Zoom meetings, we're always looking for new speakers. And we have the schedule up open right now for next year. So if you're interested, please get in touch with Robin or myself, and we'll give you more details. And our contact information will be in the description of the YouTube video, as will be the contact information for our speakers. And now, for a special holiday season acknowledgement, Robin and Marty, over to you.
Okay, now we would like to thank all of the speakers that so generously contributed their time to share this year. Without you, EA Zoom meetings wouldn't be possible. I have prepared some slides in celebration of the holidays and in appreciation for our speakers and participants. And as we scroll through the slides, we have Marty Dixon to play some music.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Mhm.
everyone.
Thank you, Marty.
That was beautiful, Marty. Thank you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Happy holidays. Happy solstice.
Uh-huh.
Till we meet
Yes.
again.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Thank you, everyone.